about you, but I hear there's an election coming up. Look at this crowd, man, oh man. You know, a lot of people from out of town here to put on CPAC. It's great to be back. But when they ask us about what's going on out there, I tell them we call this a warming trend. This announcement just in, Al Gore's global warming conference called off tonight. I have no idea why. Hey, but it could be worse. You could be joining Jeffrey Toobin on a Zoom meeting. Only at CNN and the New Yorker, huh? Sometimes you just want to tell these liberals, when you're in a hole, quit digging. But thankfully, they don't listen much. And I will tell you, that redounds to our benefit because as of now, as of last night, we are statistically in a dead heat with Tina Smith in the United States Senate race. Yeah, these Democrats, the greatest collection of misfits since the Star Wars bar scene. I'm telling you, Tina's in hiding. I don't know what's going on. She won't debate us. Imagine that. But then again, if I was for perpetual federal lockdowns, defunding the police, packing the Supreme Court, post-birth abortion, and taking away your Second Amendment rights, I guess I wouldn't debate anybody either. This group of Democrats has presented the country to get back to first principles. Now, I thought, you know, in this election, which I announced over a year ago and 40,000 miles earlier, we'd be talking about the minutiae of legislation and all the great things we did in the 115th Congress, like tax reform, like putting Minnesota first, putting America first, getting tough on China. We're getting so tough on China, even Gordon Chang would be happy about that. You know, yeah, you got that right. He's a great guy. And I'll tell you something. When I'm your next senator, and the president is reelected, you ain't seen nothing yet. I thought we'd be talking about VA reform, career and technical education. We just heard about the First Step Act, my bill, the Juvenile Justice Reauthorization Act. Hadn't been done in 15 years. We got it done in 2 years. The president signed it into law. And now I can officially tell Jimmy Carter, you can take off that cardigan, turn up the thermostat because we're energy independent. Well, that's what I thought we'd be talking about. But I didn't know these Democrats. I didn't know they'd be talking about taking away the Second Amendment. They'd be talking about defunding the police. I mean, seriously, defunding the police. Well, if you get into an altercation, who are you going to call? Dr. Phil? That's what they're telling us. I thought we'd be talking about this great Trump economy, the lowest unemployment rate since 1969, lowest ever for African Americans and women. Yeah. I thought we'd be talking about keeping that going, but no, we started listening to Dr. Fauci. We started listening to the Minnesota Department of Health, who said in April that by the end of July, 39,000 Minnesotans would be dead of COVID. They're just about 2,000. That's 2,000 too many. But as the old baseball announcer Bob Uecker used to say, just a bit outside. The WHO now that has suddenly discovered the lockdowns don't work, told us that 281 million Americans would be infected with COVID. There are 7 million. Just a bit outside. These people, these epidemiologists, are starting to make weathermen look accurate. And yet we decided to lock down an entire economy on the basis of these false predictions. It's almost enough to make you think the Democrats were looking for a reason to hunker in the basement. And they found it with these blue state governors. Tina Smith has blocked COVID relief except for bailing out governments. In every public health challenge going back to the Spanish flu, we gave public health recommendations. We never gave mandates, and that's what we ought to go back to, recommendations. And while they were locking down healthy businesses and healthy individuals and school-age kids who had 5 times the likelihood of catching the flu and having problems than COVID, they were taking COVID-positive patients out of hospitals in New Jersey, in New York, and in Minnesota, and putting them in long-term congregated facilities called nursing homes. When we look back on this whole episode, this will not be a disagreement. It won't be a public policy blunder. This will be a scandal of untold proportions, and it will never happen again if I'm your next senator. So if that wasn't enough, however, then they moved on to riots. Then they moved on to, it's bizarre what's happening in this country right now. I mean, I tuned into C-SPAN to watch a political speech and an NFL game broke out. Everything's becoming political everywhere you go, but yet they're having a hard time selling this one. When a young man in San Francisco wants to organize a rally for Trump and loses his two front teeth, what are the next words that are followed every time you see that story in a news report? No arrests were made. Every single report of carnage in Minneapolis to San Francisco to Portland, no arrests were made. Well, I'm going to give you a little preview of Donald Trump's second term and myself as your next U.S. Senator. Arrests will be made, I'll guarantee it. Defunding the police. Now, there's an idea for the ages. If the government is not going to protect life, liberty, and property, that phrase mentioned twice in the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment, the reason that it is the fundamental function of government. If they're not going to do that, what do we've got government for? And yet, that's what we're arguing with these people about. We're not arguing about the finer points of the Constitution. We're now arguing with Democrats on whether we ought to keep it or not. This is a full-throated assault on that document, that little thin piece of paper that separates us from tyranny. And I will tell you this, any notion of packing the Supreme Court is a full-throated assault on the separation of powers and that document as well, the Constitution. In my last and final debate with Tina Smith, I said, are you for packing the court or not? She said, in Biden fashion, well, I'm not going to go there, which is code for yes. They're going to add members to the court until they get the rulings they want, which means Marbury versus Madison means nothing. There is no judicial review. There is no separation of powers. They are trading the tyranny of the monarchy for the tyranny of the mob. And that's what we've got to stop. Because if we don't think it's going to get better. I know the conventional wisdom is, oh my gosh, if Trump gets reelected, there's going to be chaos. It's going to be bad. In fact, Biden and Harris and Smith have already said as much. You better elect us or else. Just the opposite is true. If Biden pulls this out, the left and Antifa and BLM and the violence will be emboldened. No person who disagrees with them will be. They're already, Robert Reich is already talking about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That's the stuff of banana republics. And that's what they want. They want to purge public opinion that doesn't agree with theirs everywhere. And I tell you, it's a full-throated assault on every aspect of the Bill of Rights. First Amendment, it's gone. Cancel culture on campus, that's where it started. Now it's going into the streets. Yeah, but everybody wonders why there's a silent majority, right? Why? I don't know. There's no Nixonian silent majority. What are you talking about? Well, imagine this. You're in downtown Minneapolis and you see riots on the streets and somebody with a MAGA hat on getting beat up, and some stranger calls you on the phone. You don't support Donald Trump, do you? Oh, okay, I'm going to answer that. The silent majority in 2020 is greater than 2016, and it's going to put Minnesota in the red column in a couple of days. Minnesotans want to keep their Second Amendment rights. Why do you think so many questions of Amy Coney Barrett were directed at two Supreme Court decisions written by Justice Scalia, Heller and McDonald? He said, for you constitutional scholars out there, there's a little thing called incorporation doctrine. I'm not going to get into the weeds, thankfully, but it simply says we're going to apply the Bill of Rights to the states. So for all these decades, we've had the federal judiciary running roughshod over states. I didn't like a lot of that, but if you're going to do it, you apply them all. But the left forgot about one. They forgot about one Bill of Rights they forgot to apply to the state. Clarence Thomas called it a constitutional orphan. It was your God-given and fundamental right of self-defense and to keep and bear arms. And you know what? You know what Justice Scalia did in Heller and McDonald? He said, well, actually, you can't pick and choose. The Bill of Rights are all about protecting individual rights. There is no collective right to free speech. There's only an individual right to free speech. And there is no collective right to defend yourself and your property and your family. There's only an individual right. And Justice Scalia said that. So they asked Coney Barrett, you don't believe that, do you? Well, I tell you what they're going to do. I tell you what they're going to do. If we don't hold the last firewall of freedom, the U.S. Senate, Schumer's going to take it away. He's going to undo the filibuster rule on legislation. Then they're going to expand the number of jurists until they get the ruling they want. Now that you've defunded the police, now that you're not arresting the mobs, and now that you don't have a God-given right of self-defense, what do you think folks are going to do? This is what we're up against. This is not a debate about the small ball things anymore. This is big league stuff. This is a debate about first principles. This is a debate about whether we're going to live in a country and that believes in the God-given rights of life and liberty and property, or whether we're going to turn our rights over to the mob. You know, Thomas Paine once famously said, "We have it within our power to begin the world anew again." And so it is today in Minnesota. You and I, with a new conservative Republican senator and a new president for the first time since 1972 that has won a second term with the help of Minnesotans, have it within our power to begin the world anew again, and have it within our power to begin Minnesota anew again. Not long before he died, Thomas Jefferson was asked on whether he thought what was most important. Whether he thought that the rule of law was most important, or being obliged by the rule of law. And he said, that's important. But there are laws that are more important. The laws of necessity, the laws of self-preservation, and the law of saving your country when in danger. Ladies and gentlemen, and my friends at CPAC, now is our time to begin our world new again and go out there on November 3rd and save our country. Thank you very much.